It's nice to see you here this afternoon. I try to think, I mean, we just heard, I try to look at everything. So it's difficult to know where to start with people to talk about the life course. So what I do is I say, think about when you were born. I know we can't, but anyway, imagine what it was like when you were born. And you have this nice little brain, right? Over time, that nice little brain grows. And it grows within an environment. And we know increasingly, just think of the size of it. Okay, it's this big, then it's this big. All that growth has happened within an environment that has all of those complex factors. It has to do with the larger world in which you live. It has to do with your relationships with other people. So there are a lot of things that come into play before, poof, you're here today, right? So here we are today. And we also know that increasingly we talk about the plasticity of the brain. So it's not fixed the way it was once thought. It starts out small and it grows large, and there's a lot that happens, and it happens from the time we're born until we're not anymore. So I started working on life course analysis to try and understand some problems that were of interest to the government. The government was funding the project, federal government, provincial government. They wanted to know, not surprisingly, why do some people go off in courses that aren't good? They're not good from a government point of view. They're not good even from the people's point of view. So they wanted to know things like, why can't people quit smoking? Now, for any of you who have ever smoked, you realize this is not so easy. But why do people continue to smoke? And it has healthcare implications. Why do people end up in incarceration facilities where neither they nor anyone else want them to be? All sorts of things that are problematic. And I don't know. I'm hoping I'm not the only one here who was not perfect all their life while their brain was developing. I'm sure there's got to be somebody else out there besides me. The reality is, you know what? None of us are perfect. Or at least, I'm sorry, I'm not, anyway. A lot of us aren't. And we've made mistakes along the way. We've done things that weren't always quite according to the rules. So the question is, why do some of us kind of make it through that and other ones don't? And when I started to ask this, what I found was the ones who really don't make it through, that things, instead of, you get past that and you move on, problems compounded. And the way I would talk about it is that people disappeared. And the more they disappeared from different places, the greater the odds became that something was going to go seriously wrong. So where do we normally find young people? We find them in the schools, we find them on the sports teams, we find them in swimming lessons, we find them in our communities, in their families. The more they disappear from those places, every time they disappear from another place, we multiply the odds of things going wrong. And we talk about, oh, it's the parents' fault, or oh, it's their peers' fault. What I found was that really, as long as you can keep young people connected to our world in all of the ways we think, they'll get past that. They're not going to be perfect. I wasn't perfect, and I think from the few of the Snickers, not everybody here was perfect. But they're going to get past it. They're not going to get past it if they're not connected. It's a really serious thing to become disconnected from our society. So we talk about, did they drop out of school or did they quit? Did they get kicked out of their home or did they run away? But what I found was, it was more what I would call withdrawal. It's people withdraw. Have you ever been somewhere and you just think, I am never going back there again? Like, it's just so uncomfortable, you didn't fit with the people, that's withdrawal. That seems to be more what happens. It's not sort of one side or the other, it's that it just doesn't work. So we know a lot about, I'm sure all of you've heard, that we have to be very careful about early years. We have to be careful that children are secure and nurtured when they're infants. And there's the question of secure attachment to adult caregivers. And without that secure attachment, we don't develop. We know from the Romanian orphans and so on that development is problematic. What I would argue, we also have to be connected to the tribe. We have to be connected to our tribe. That is where our security comes from. And if you look at it from an evolutionary point of view, we're biologically programmed to be part of the tribe. We depend on that tribe, as you just heard, for our security. And without that, we don't have that security. So we need to think about secure attachment when people are young. We also need to think about that secure attachment as they grow older, and all of us here today. So this is the hardest part of my talk. I want to tell you a story, and it's about two young people, beautiful, beautiful young people, both of them. And I'm not going to use names. I'm going to call them Romeo and Juliet. So Romeo and Juliet. And one of them became part of the tribe, and the other one didn't. And the reason I'm telling you this story is so you can see how people's paths go differently and what happens. So their first date, that's where we'll begin, Romeo and Juliet. Their first date, they went to the movie theater. And so his mother drove him, her mother drove her, and they saw, I don't remember what the movie, they saw a movie. And so when Juliet was done, she said, well, it was a good date, but I don't know if I'll ever see him again. So the next night, Romeo turned up on Juliet's doorstep with a rose. And as they say, the rest was history. So they were together all through, this was the end of junior high, and they were together through high school. And Juliet was an extrovert. Juliet would have been much better up here than I am. She liked to be on stage. She liked to perform. She was, she was in a rock band. She was, went to the theater, did theater performance. Much better than me, trust me. Anyway, Romeo was her biggest fan. So Romeo would sit in the audience and always clap. And Romeo did things. He did skateboarding. But skateboarding doesn't connect you to our tribe. It's great exercise. You get the participation points, but it doesn't connect you to our tribe. And Romeo started to just kind of disappear a little bit. He went to the classes he really liked in school. He'd always be there. But then there were other ones he didn't go to so much. And his marks were, okay, but he wasn't totally connected. And as time went on, we reached into high school, and Juliet, on stage, here's Juliet. Juliet's all keen. She knows what she's doing, right? She's going off to university, and she knows which one she's going to. She's moving away from home. It's good. But she's really concerned about Romeo, because Romeo doesn't seem to know what he's going to do. So she brings Romeo to me, and she says, what are we going to do with Romeo? Because he doesn't seem to know what he's going to do. And so I said, well, you know what? I think Romeo would be really good in the people sciences, like me, because he's really perceptive of people, and he's one of the most decent people I've ever met in my life. So then Romeo and I started to talk about this, and he said he thought he'd like to go somewhere, not where he was like Juliet was moving away to another university. He thought he'd like to move away to another university. And I said, well, that's great, but you just have to plan, because in addition to planning for your residence fees, you have to plan for your tuition. And he said, what's tuition? This was beyond when I explained the how much and the process and so on, this was beyond Romeo's comprehension of where he could go. And this really troubled me because of what I do. And I thought, you know, what can I do? What can I do? Is there some way I could do this? But what really worried me was I wasn't sure that Romeo was going to be able to connect at university. And it wasn't because he wasn't capable. But I always go back to the research because I'm a researcher. And there was interesting research done, interesting in a sad way, that the research focused on young people who were hurrying to class to write an exam. Now, any of you who have ever done this, you know this. I mean, it stresses. I can't even stand, like, I'm the one giving the exam, and the atmosphere, I can't even stand it. So people are stressed, there's no question. And this is why it's not about the individual person. These aren't bad people, but it's a difficult situation. Students rushing to an exam, and someone gets hurt. How many of them stop? Not that many, I hate to tell you. Romeo would have been one of the ones who stopped. Romeo was a real, you know, good person. And he disappeared. Juliet went off to university. She came home, and I said, so what's Romeo doing? And she said, nothing. And I thought, oh dear, this is not good, right? Nothing. And so I said, well, ask Romeo to come see me. So she said, she asked Romeo, and she came back, and she said, Romeo said he didn't understand why you wanted to see him. And I thought, oh no, this is really bad. The next year, Juliet gets a call at about midnight, and she falls to the floor because Romeo's dead. That's a true story, and that's why I do the work I do. It's a very serious thing for kids not to connect. And I see it increasingly in my classes. It's not just about physically disappearing. We now have $1 billion industry in anti-anxiety drugs so people can come to class. I was talking to a principal, and he said he had a young person who was smoking pot, and he said, you can't smoke pot and come to school. And the kid said, I have to smoke pot or I can't come to school. So it's serious. I ask people where they feel most comfortable, and they say by themselves or in virtual worlds. I think there are serious things that have moved beyond being individual problems. Now, I'm a sociologist, so that is the way I look at it. However, I'm not in despair. I believe all of this is based on the way we think. So it's as simple as change your mind, change the world. And I believe one of our biggest problems is that we bought into the idea that what we should be doing is trying to be better than other people, because we have so many competitions. We have competitions for everything, to be beautiful, to be, you know, bodybuilding, to be all of those things. We've bought into it. That's a dangerous way of thinking because it divides us. But there are certainly other ways of thinking, and we can change into them very quickly. I had the pleasure of spending an afternoon with a young man who was the worst kid in the school, right? I get to play baseball with him. And he started off, he was so critical of me, and trust me, I can't play baseball, so he was absolutely right. But everything was, oh, you did that wrong, you know? You bring out what you see in people. So he had been blamed, he blamed other people, he criticized. Within half an hour, I threw the ball, he missed. I said, oh, I must have done it wrong. He said, no, you did a great job. I missed. It only takes half an hour. I couldn't believe it. It's amazing. A principal I knew who changed the school. She changed the school. She said, there will be no auditions. Everyone who wants to perform will perform. And the young people who needed it the most were the stars. Now, here's our little smiley guy at the end. I believe smiles are the glue that hold our world together. A weird thing to say. But when you smile at somebody, again, we'll do the research, when you smile at somebody, they're much more likely to help you down the line. So really all you need to do is smile. And all of a sudden, you're surrounded with very helpful people. And there's a prize. I have a prize for every single person who does this, who smiles. It releases endorphins in your brain, and you'll be happier. So win-win. Thank you.